So, hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. Hope you're well. Maybe just begin with an introduction to this amazing film, Sunlight. What can people expect when they watch it?
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks a million for having me on. It's great. Lovely to meet you. So Sunlight was a film made with a micro budget here in Ireland. It was supported by Screen Ireland through a scheme to help get more female talent into the industry. And it's basically, it's kind of a love story, really, between two men who are friends. And Iver is an older man who has motor neuron disease, and he has decided he wants to end his own life. He was sort of always identified as a very strong person physically, and he sort of can't handle what the disease is doing to him. So in a kind of a cowardly way, I suppose, in some respects, he won't face the world in his physically disabled state anymore. He's not able to kind of identify with that, new way. So his best friend and his carer, Leon, discovers him trying to exit, basically, and he won't have any of this. He's like, no, not at all. There's loads to live for. I'm going to convince you to live. And he tries to get him to change his mind through a day out in Dublin. It remains to be seen if you watch the film what happens. But yeah, it's very much a story about friendship and the power of friendship.
And you've made a few shorts before. This is obviously your feature debut, but I know you've sort of collaborated with the screenwriter before. So what was the kind of initial inspiration, to tell the story, and why did you think it was the right one to tell for your feature debut?
Well, myself and Alva Kyogan, the writer, had worked on a short film in 2017. It was called Take Me Swimming. And Alva wrote that actually shortly after her mother passed. She just had a lot, I suppose, to say about death, maybe choosing the time of your own death as well. And she wrote a beautiful short film, and she asked me what I directed, and I read actually was a treatment I read. I didn't even read the script. I was like, yeah, I absolutely want to do this and I want to work with you. And after the film was made, Alva really felt that there was more to say on this. So she had more she wanted to say on this subject. We also, I suppose, loved working with Barry Ward, who's in Sunlight, who's the star of Sunlight. And, we just all really wanted to work together again. And this scheme came up that I mentioned with Screen Ireland. And Alva felt, she said, there's more I want to talk about. And she pitched us this idea. And we said, absolutely. We all wanted to work together. We really liked the idea. We knew we could work together well. We had a shorthand. It was a long process. Screen Ireland were very much involved in the development of the script as well. And you know what? It was more the team. In a way, actually, originally, it was more the team for me. I was like, I absolutely want to work with all these people again. It was such a lovely collaborative way of working that I felt, this is for me. I want to do this.
And, I think what really strikes me about the film is, it's not a topic that I think we see explored on screen a lot. And so it's tackling something that perhaps is a bit taboo, death and how we feel about death and losing our loved one, it's not something that people sort of want to talk about very much, but it approaches it with such lightness in a way. And there's a kind of real dark humor sort of coursing through it. So what was it that you kind of wanted to do and play with by sort of tackling something that is not much talked about topic, but in this particular tone?
Well, I think I wouldn't have liked to make a film about euthanasia and choosing the time of your own death if it didn't have some kind of humor attached. I know that might sound, I'm not being flippant there, and I'm not making light of euthanasia. Absolutely not. I think maybe it's a particularly Irish way of dealing with death or dealing with dark topics, is that it kind of has to go hand in hand with a bit of humor. I think there's an irreverent sense of humor built into it that, I don't know, for me, it rang true. It mightn't ring true for everybody. And dealing with euthanasia in this way may rub some people up the wrong way. And I apologize if it does. That wasn't our intention. I think it was more just that was what we felt was the most sort of like truthful way for us to deal with the subject. Actually, that was what interested me. If it had been very sort of dark and gloomy and depressing, and I just don't think I could have made it. I think it's more interesting when, and again, it just rings more true to, I think, maybe a Dublin sense of humor as well, that you kind of deal with darkness and that kind of, and I just can't imagine those two characters going ahead with what they end up doing and not making a joke about it. I think that's the only way they could have got through it, was by making light of it, actually. and having a laugh, you know. And I think it's because even though the film is about choosing the time of your own death, it is a celebration of life as well, you know, and you have to laugh at some awful stuff, or, you know, it's not worth it, you know. So yeah, so that attracted me to it as well.
And this incredible cast, like you say, working with Barry again, I mean, they all just bounce off each other perfectly, but particularly Barry brings this kind of a kinetic energy about his Leon. And, you know, obviously throughout the film, each of their backstories, you know, we get different glimpses of that. And you can see that Leon's lived a really difficult life, but sort of in spite of all that, you know, he's got this sort of optimism, which is quite kind of contagious. So how did you see your three characters, and how did you work with your cast, I guess, to develop those and the relationship between them?
Yeah, like Barry was on board before the script was written. So he actually, I suppose, came on board. We said, "Do you want to make Fiat?" You know, so he knew, I mean, obviously then he knew what the story was, but the script wasn't even written when Barry was actively engaging and kind of like, you know, getting involved in the conversations. So much, and I know Alva loved having a particular actor in mind when she's writing any character. You know, that doesn't always pan out. You don't always get the person you were thinking of, but I know it definitely helps Alva to create the character. So it was amazing that we knew Barry was going to be our Leon. And that really helped, I know, to create and craft who Leon became. Also, Leon, so Barry knew Liam. He had worked, I think one of his first jobs when he was 14 was a theatre production, and in Ireland, in Dublin, and Liam was in the cast, and like they knew each other even back then. So I think there was a kind of, they weren't best friends or anything, but they definitely had a little bit of you know, they knew they'd met each other, and there was an instant connection between those two. And I think that chemistry you can really see on screen. Maureen came on board very late in the day. I think it was maybe the week before or something. And we were like, oh my God. But actually, I couldn't have asked for a better Maria. She was stunning. And the three of them just instantly gelled. It was amazing. And Maureen, funnily enough and coincidentally enough, was involved in the Right to Die movement in the UK. So it was kind of like, wow, this is the kind of perfect cast, you know. We didn't really have a lot of rehearsal time. We didn't really want loads of rehearsal time either. We sort of wanted it to feel very kind of immediate. Everything was sort of like created and crafted around who Leon was. So the style of filming, as you say, he has this kind of kinetic energy, and we said everything was driven by who Leon was. So that kind of bouncing around kind of never stops. We kind of fed that. That was inspiration for Narian Van Mali, our DOP, for how he was going to film it. Even the score. So we were delayed by a year because of COVID. So we were supposed to film in 2020, and then everything just got pushed by an entire year to 2021. So Barry had a year to think about Leon. Well, whether that's a good thing or not, I don't know. But himself and Seamus Fogarty, who is an Irish musician living in London, who composed the final cacophonous, crazy end piece of music, they had a year to just basically on and off meet in Barry's garden shed and like create music. So they have an album's worth of music now for Leon, and they have a Christmas hit and everything apparently. So they had a long time to work together. But that music that Seamus created was inspiration for our composers when they were doing the score. We said, like, just imagine Leon has made the score, you know. So I think having Barry early on was just, you know, it was amazing for us because so much, you know, he inspired, I think, so much of all the other creative elements in the film. Yeah.
And I think the other thing as well is, you know, the fact that we're sort of in this world of quite sort of gritty realism, but then there's also these really striking images. I mean, even this opening scene with the bag on the head, and then even the way Barry looks, you know, with the dyed hair and the cut that he's got. Then they're like riding through the streets on horseback with this sort of Viking garb. So was that also kind of something that you wanted to do in terms of the sort of visual elements of the film? So even though we are in a very grounded place, there are these sort of moments where, you know, the images really pop out the screen.
Yeah, exactly. So because, again, it has that, as you say, that kind of gritty realism, we wanted it to feel very naturalistic, and that was all through the color palette, the style of filming. Everything was very much driven from, apart from Angela's flat, which is like, ooh, pink, nearly everything else you see is very muted and kind of, downplayed visually a lot. So we kind of felt we needed a few kind of moments when visually things kind of, just become a little bit more spectacular. The horses, like, I suppose the area that the area of Dublin where it's set, there's a huge there's a lot of stables. There's a lot of horse stables around. Traditionally there would have been, I mean, there's less and less now as the years go on, but there are a lot of stables. Just like walk down the street and just in behind a laneway there'd be a horse stables, so that's a very common sight around this part of Dublin. So we kind of wanted a little nod to that as well. And because, Iver is a Viking enthusiast and they, reconstruct, Viking scenes, it just made sense that he would have a stable. So that kind of fell into place a little bit, and it just felt right for Dublin as well. So ideally I would have liked loads of horses on the street, but, that's what happens with a micro budget, you want 10 horses and you can have 3. So, that was all kind of important, that we had those kind of little moments where things just kind of lift a bit visually. Yeah.
And I'm almost out of time, but in terms of, I guess, the themes that emerge and the takeaways, like you say, you're kind of in this sort of little bit of a roller coaster of the buddy film, but then there are these sort of meaty topics that are being dealt with. How do we feel about the right to die? Where are we on things like that in this country? I know you can sort of be you can go abroad perhaps and be able to deal with that in a different way, but it's not something that we're able to discuss in a very easy way. Maybe cinema and films like this can open up dialogue and make you think about what you feel about these things. But also there's something very heartwarming in there, which is like, it's never too late to kind of have these connections with people. How important are our friendships and our relationships, and making really good memories as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And hopefully it does open up a bit of discussion in Ireland. I know we are starting to talk about it. So I think it's important to, and I know when we made Take Me Swimming, we were sort of a little bit on the fence with, okay, are we saying that we are, telling people that we are on the side of the right to die, or are we not? We were kind of not, but I think with this film, it is very much, we are kind of saying, yeah, we think people should choose the time if they want to. And not everyone with a terminal illness, obviously, as Maria says in the film, she's not saying that everyone with a terminal illness should die. It's totally up to the individual. But I suppose with this film, we are as filmmakers saying that we think it's important to have the discussion, and that we feel if you feel really strongly about it, then, you should have that right, or at least we should discuss it,
And I guess snuck in there as well, perhaps is a bit of social commentary on the fact, if you look at these individuals, even Leon, how much is he a product of, the deprivation he's been born into? And when we, like we say, hearing glimpses of his backstory and what happened with his mother. So even though, he has this really tenacious spirit, there's some parts of life that have kind of been a challenge for him and hurdles for him. And how much are we looking at that in society? How much are some people not really getting a proper chance in life because our society is so hierarchical? And, how do you kind of get yourself out of deprivation?
Absolutely. And really, Leon met Iver at a pivotal time in his life. So, and he attributes his recovery, to Iver, because he might have wanted to get clean, but maybe, I suppose the hard thing is then staying clean. And he has Cleggs, his cousin, who's a drug dealer, always there, kind of in the same estate as he lives, always there trying to get him back. So he always has Iver to get, even on his day off. He just wants to get out because he just doesn't want to be around that temptation, So I think, that was kind of another, like, we don't really go into it too much because it is really just one day. And I suppose that was a bit of a challenge script wise, I know, for Alva and for us as well, like to try and, okay, you want like characters that feel real. You don't have a lot of time to show, much about. So even with Iver and his ex-wife, who he treated very badly, we don't have a lot. It's all kind of verbally said, which really isn't something I suppose normally I would do in film. So that was a kind of a challenge but definitely with Leon, like, you're seeing just visually surrounding him where he's come from, and as you say, the challenges that can offer someone. And maybe in another, if he'd been born somewhere else, he would never have got onto drugs, and that would never have been, he would have gone to music. He would have had, like, he has this kind of talent, this little child that hasn't really had a chance, and he's trying now. And you're kind of at the end, I suppose the way we wanted it to be seen was like, is he talented or is he a bit terrible? Or, like, you're kind of going, oh, this is kind of awkward, but maybe he's got a tiny bit of talent. But like if he'd been brought up in a middle class background, he probably would have all the instruments thrown at him at 6 years old, so again, yeah, so that's in there, but it's not a big theme. But as you say, it is being hinted at, definitely.
But I think ultimately it does land somewhere that is quite uplifting, which is like, despite what situation you might be in, or things can look a bit bleak, you can find joy, and you can find these amazing friendships and relationships, and you can, and how important it can be to help others, like the fact that I was his mentor and actually really helped him out. So it can sort of inspire people to go and be like, okay, maybe I can be that person for someone else.
Yeah, exactly. And like that Leon is such a strong, bright, lovely person, that all he's been through, and, he's probably done, horrible things in his background as an addict as well, but that he has that spirit, that human spirit will always kind of shine through. And I think Leon just has this spirit that he just can't put him down. He is always going to kind of, and that's how, what we hope at the end, that it's like, and I know, okay, because the end was funny, because we're like, okay, he's just burnt him on a boat, like, and we had this version where we had like Maria being, defending him to the police, and we had all this stuff about what was going to happen afterwards, but we said, you know what, we're just going to leave that, because that was one day, and then this is a lot, later, and we'll just have to kind of leave it that, okay, it got sorted, but but that Leon spirit will just kind of shine through, and he'll always sort of, that will come out on top.
And what's it meant to you seeing kind of the reaction? No, it was at Glasgow Film Festival, is that right? And now obviously it's getting
we had a
wider release
in Glasgow. It was absolutely, I'm so happy that we all got to go over there, because like Maureen is Scottish, so it was really nice to have, we had that Scottish connection. And I think Scotland and Ireland, especially Dublin and Glasgow, I think there's a connection there, definitely. So we had a great response. It was a lovely screening. It was my first time in Glasgow, I am ashamed to say, but we had a fantastic night. So it was really great. And yeah, so that was lovely. That was a lovely trip. And it's been going around to different festivals in Europe, and it's fantastic now that I'm delighted it's getting a small release in the UK as well as Ireland. That means a lot as well.
And do you know what you're going to be working on next? Have you got another idea? Are we working together again, or new people, or different story?
Yeah, we're working together again. Well, hopefully we have a script in development. It's an adaptation of an American short writer called Karen Russell. She wrote a collection of short stories called Orange World, and we're adapting Orange World, which is a story about it's a very different kind of film, actually. It's our story. So it's a new mother who makes a pact. She's afraid she's going to lose her baby, and so she makes a pact with the devil that if she breastfeeds him, then she can keep the baby. And he appears to her as this kind of weird rodent in the sewers. So it's a very different film. But it's very exciting. She's an amazing writer, Karen. And so we're working on that at the moment. But who knows what will happen. Hopefully we get to make it. But that's what we're working on right now.
Amazing. Well, can't wait to see that as well. But of course, for everyone to see Sunlight as well. And when it's out this week, I think. Yeah, this Friday. Thanks so much. Lovely to chat to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Lovely to meet you.
Thanks a million. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.